I think actually the human experience in general, when you talk about it on a deep enough level, that it's contradicting, right? How I see my life and my story changes and evolves all of the time, you know? And that's why I say to people, try not to get too angry with anything I say, because I might not believe it next week. They were holding the mirror up to me because they're so much like me. Every defense that I've built up around my own sensitivity, particularly, when they were around me, they pulled them defenses down and made me be with that sensitivity in a way that made me feel uncomfortable. So I always approach the relationship metaphorically, really on guard. That's why I'm so genuinely so passionate about not gatekeeping breathwork in any way and making sure that I strip it right back as much as I can when I deliver it. We're just going to breathe, and this is just about you and an experience for you and nothing else. If you can jump through the fire, the other side is where it's at, right? Like that's where it's at. That's where you want to be.
We'll make it out and fall in love tonight.
We're super excited for today's guest. His name is Josh Conley, and he's written a brand new book called It's Them, Not You. Josh Conley stands as a prominent mental health advocate in the United Kingdom. He's recognized for his impactful presence in the media and a substantial social media following of over 250,000. As a certified breath coach, his mission centers on guiding individuals to gain deeper insights into their own selves and emotions by fostering a connection with their intuition and body. Josh actively conducts resilience workshops, catering to both local village schools and international corporate giants. Additionally, he serves as a passionate ambassador for NACOA, a national charity dedicated to providing support to those affected by parents' alcohol consumption.
This was such a fun conversation, and we really got to get to know Josh during the episode. Throughout the entire conversation, he highlighted many things that stuck with us and we'll be processing for a while.
If you head over to his website, it's joshconley.co.uk. You can learn more about him as well as his offerings. He has a 6-week program called Inner You that he hosts several times throughout the year, as well as an online community called Breathing Space. His book comes out in July, but it's available for pre-sale right now, so go check it out.
You can find links to all of Josh's socials in the show notes. Now it's time for the episode, so enjoy.
I want to give you a little bit of a backstory of how I kind of came across your work and your content and everything like that, because I'm super familiar with your work. I know that Steph just said that she's heard a lot about you because I've shared tons, not just your content, but everything that I kind of really resonate and gravitate to when it comes to all the things that you do. But the thing that's really stood out to me, and I don't even remember, it was sometime last year, probably early last year, where I was seeing some of your content pop up, and it's all around like no contact with parents and really being accountable for that whole dynamic where you have a childhood that is full of, well, I'll speak for myself. I have a traumatic past. I have a childhood that's full of trauma, right? And over the course of my life, it's been unpacking all of that to varying degrees and different ways and everything like that. And 2 years ago, is it 2 years ago, right? It's 2024 now.
I think it might have been 3.
2 years ago, I went no contact with my mom, just hard no contact with her. And so that was a really big point in the healing process for me, but it also came obviously with tons of things to unpack after the fact. And seeing a lot of your content around those type of topics and navigating what that really looks like in reality and kind of calling out not just societal viewpoints on those type of things, but also how it's kind of navigated with those relationships. That's the stuff that really stood out to me, because you don't see a lot of people talking about it in the way that you do, Josh. And so I want to thank you first and foremost, because it was like finding your stuff at a moment where it was really beneficial for me to see somebody else talking about it out loud and speaking some of these really hard things was really impactful and helpful. And so I kind of want to start the conversation there. I know a lot about your backstory, but I want you to be able to share what you want to be able to share.
Well, look, firstly, I just appreciate everything that you've just said and the way that you've shared it, and it's quite validating to hear, right, from my perspective. I think there's a huge issue in the way that we talk about abuse and the way that people experience dysfunction, particularly within the family. And by the way, when I say particularly in the family, the reality is that statistically, that's where most abuse happens anyway. So even that shows how warped the conversation is, because often when we think about being on the end of abuse, we sort of think about it with children. We think about like a dark and scary stranger. When you think about abuse with children, that's what most people think, and it's rarely that. And then with adults, we sort of think that you can only be abused in a sort of loving relationship, and so it becomes something that's, I think, really difficult to talk about clearly, and also because there's a lot of different truths. I think that's really important to understand, that like, I think actually the human experience in general, when you talk about it on a deep enough level, that it's contradicting, right? You know, I think if you peel back enough layers, you will start to contradict yourself. And I'm quite comfortable. I'm okay to do that. I think I'm okay with myself knowing that that's the reality. And I guess a lot of that comes from my own journey as well, right? And discovering my own truth.
We talk about it all the time from that. Like, that was a big part of us navigating things in our relationship. We've been together for 12 years, married for 9 of those years. And at some point we had to start, I mean, we're both right sometimes, even though we have conflicting points of view, right? It's no longer the idea that, well, my viewpoint or how I'm feeling about a situation is the right way or the correct way, right? We're both really valid in our experiences, and so much has shaped what those experiences are and what those viewpoints are. And you're right in the sense of, like, the human experience is that polarity of carrying those two opposing thoughts and just sitting in the discomfort of it, right? Where you can love somebody and hate them at the same time. You can be, really, really happy and joyful about something and feel really positive, and then still walk around with grief and sadness and be able to kind of experience both polarities all at once.
And I think that part of the societal issues that we see at the moment, or perhaps for a long time, are driven by our need for certainty, our need to make things black and white, right? And so often I see that, like, even when I think about the way that I put content online, sometimes people will angrily argue a point as if their point is against the point I've made. And I think, well, in the fact that I've said that some people have to go no contact, that doesn't mean that I'm suggesting that there aren't any other truths, and that when a parent messes up, we have to go no contact, and so often people project their own, they project what they hear onto what's said, right? And I think, by the way, I'm certainly not free of that myself, right? And I think social media actually is a place where really brings that out. I think I'm perhaps at my worst as a human being sometime in the comment section of my own posts. Like some of that toxicity that I'm able to spot and see is a reflection of who I've become, like in many aspects, in some aspects of my life.
Yeah, it's so wonky sometimes where because we'll have content sometimes that we thought had a very clear message and a very clear point to it. And then almost immediately you're getting everybody else's perspective of what you just said. And it's fascinating what people will hear and see and project onto you in these little, 30-second clips and moments. And then down in the comments, you get all of those kind of different takes of it.
Yeah, there's we often hear the saying, when the student's ready, the teacher appears, right? And what we mean by that is often, like, when we're ready, we'll hear what we need to hear. But I think, like, the opposite of that is also true as well, right? When we're in a dark place and full of pain, then we will hear the version of that too. And it's so hard to spot when that happens. So let me give you an example, like a personal example. What you just described there is one of the things that I find the most triggering online. So somebody could say something horrendous to me, and if I'm having a bad day, it might get me. But most of the time, I'm sort of like, can see clearly that's them. But if somebody argues against something that I've not said, So I feel really misunderstood, and I can't correct that because they're just arguing against something I'm not even saying. So then you can't even get into. That's very triggering for me, right? For a lot of different reasons. But I remember as a child feeling really, really misunderstood by adults who had more power than me and not being able to adequately communicate that. And I was so frustrated by that when I was a child. And so I go back to being that child sometimes online. And of course, I become a petulant teenager. And then before you know it, you're like I'm an awful, like, because I'll start, and this is the crazy thing about it all, right? If I'm not careful, I'm using the tactics I made a reel about last week to try and make this person look stupid online, right? So and I think that's part of why I'm able to do it, right? Of why I'm able to make the content is because sometimes I hold a mirror up to myself, right? And that's confronting.
It's so hard. We always talk about it, like we refer to it as trauma years, where we'll be in the middle of a conversation and it might start to get a little heated. One of us might start to get a little triggered. And next thing you know, they're hearing things, like literally, I will hear things that Stephanie did not say.
Yeah.
I will hear things that she says to me, but I'll hear it through this lens and through these ears that is very much like a little kid, where I'm defensive, I'm trying to protect myself, I'm projecting all of this outwards onto her. And it's so funny, I can't even remember how long ago it was, but that's what we think of when we think of social media and when we think of creating all this content and engaging with people, is we're just holding up this big mirror for people to kind of see themselves in. And that whole process is one of those things that I think is really beautiful. I think it's one of the really amazing things that social media has done. But at the same time, you have to be aware of it in order for it to be beautiful. Otherwise, it just seems like this chaotic mess of everybody fucking yelling at everybody and claiming this and claiming that and pointing fingers and canceling this and canceling that. But I think it's just this really big, beautiful mirror that we can use for healing and for processing and for recognizing. But at the same time, you kind of have to have that lens or perspective.
And I've sort of learned that the hard way on my own healing journey. Like I've been sober nearly 12 years now. When I first found recovery, I would become really overly evangelical about what worked for me. And when I say overly evangelical, I mean saying, like, if you were doing it a different way, I would really need you to know that you were wrong and that you should be doing it this way, the way that I'm doing. And there were loads of different things that were driving that. But in the communities that I was in a lot at the beginning of that, I would be barking at groups of people that they need to do this thing. And then I would need to go back into those same groups of people and say, hang on a minute. I sort of believe what you believe now. And I think what I was saying was wrong. And that had to happen a few times for me to really get to the point where I genuinely, and I get lost sometimes, but genuinely most days try to live with the firm idea that I could be wrong about everything that I've ever believed, right? Because when you live like that and you have acceptance around that, it's really exciting because you don't see opposing opinions, beliefs, and behaviors as a threat. You see them as something exciting to explore and be curious about, right? Which I think is what kids are like, right? What children are like. You see them play with toys, they'll pick something up, explore it, see if they like it, if it's good, if it's fun. If not, they'll toss it away and forget that it even existed and move on to look for the next thing. But that's, if we can live life like that, then that can be exciting,
Totally. We do our best to do that, but man, is it hard. If you're comfortable, I'd love to hear some of that kind of journey and that process of 12 years of sobriety is a big deal. What do you find was one of the biggest factors? Because it's the same thing where you think you know your story and then something happens and it suddenly shifts a little bit. Like we always look at it through the lens of the universe does a really good job of just altering and shifting just like 2 degrees to the left. And suddenly you're like, fuck, well, we didn't see that part. We didn't see that part. It's just continual process of unpacking the past and how it relates to what we're at in the present moment. And so how do you see your story differently today than, maybe 5 years ago or 10 years ago, or even, 2 years ago, maybe.
Yeah, even last week, I was going to say, when you
Right?
first said 10 years ago, I love what you just described there about the changing of like 2 degrees and seeing that, right? Because I think like the way that I set a lot of my work up today and the way that I try and support people is always tried to be along that line of, I can help you unpack, like create space for you to unpack and explore where you're at and what you've got. But I can't really tell you what's best for you to do because when I first got sober, when I first stopped drinking, I believed I'd lived the perfect, most idyllic childhood with no obvious trauma whatsoever. I believed that for about a year until I realized actually the complete opposite for the first 9 years of my life anyway was true. So that revelation and 1.5 years sober me that knew that couldn't have told 10 days sober me that was the case. And by the way, but what I learned and when I look back, could 10 days sober me have handled what 1.5 years sober me had just discovered? Maybe not. So maybe what I needed was exactly that at that stage of my life, And so how I see my life and my story changes and evolves all of the time, or like all of the time, And that's why I say to people, try not to get too angry with anything I say, because I might not believe it next week. And I mean that, So look, how I see my life, and to answer the question, it changes all the time. It really, really changes all the time. My spiritual journey, my relationship to myself, to others, and to God, the universe, or however you might describe that. And I've described that in 1,000,001 different ways over the years too. Is constantly changing, constantly evolving, and big changes. The biggest changes tend to come after a prolonged period of struggle or darkness. Yeah.
When was the last big one for you?
The last when I had a real big change, like a real massive breakthrough, probably when I discovered breathwork like 4 or 5 years ago. Like that was a real moment for me, because I think that's when I went from rationalizing everything, right? To making rational sense of everything, to really realizing actually, my body holds the key. And breathwork opened me to somatic work in general, and the realization that actually it doesn't matter how much of a rational, logical expert I become on this stuff, unless I can connect my head to my heart through somatic work. Yeah, that's the one that stands out for me as like the biggest life change. But I mean, I have big moments all of the time, because I try to exist in communities to explore all this, so more of a perhaps smaller one, but quite a big moment was in breathing space. Somebody shared about how they never really allow themselves to enjoy things too much, because they're scared that if they do, then it might like get taken away. Now, this comes back to when the student's ready, the teacher appears, right? Because I've probably said that stuff for years. I've probably told other people, maybe you don't enjoy it because you're worried it would get taken away. But in that moment, for some reason, with the book and everything that I've got coming out, I realized I do the same. I can semi-enjoy it if somebody's congratulating me. Like I can be like, yeah, this is amazing. But on my own, I'd rather get busy doing the next thing, because I get uncomfortable sitting with it, And that was like a big realization. So I have big realizations like that all of the time. Yeah.
Go ahead, babe.
I was gonna say that's a big one. Like that's one that I've, sometimes you have these awarenesses that are in the background. You have these like touching upon awarenesses where you're just starting to grasp. It's in your peripheral, but not so much in your focal point. And I've had that awareness that's just been in my peripheral that I'm nervous about being in a really good mood or being really happy or really enjoying myself because then something bad's going to happen or I'm going to get punished for it or how dare I be happy? Like all of these things that come up from childhood that's been right there. And the other day I was just being all goofy and coming through the front room and was I don't know if I was singing or what, but I was like running and I don't know. I was playing is what I was doing. I'm like, how do I describe this thing? I
Just
was
being a kid.
playing and I almost fell. I about knocked my feet out from under me. And that first instinct that came up in my space is like, that's what you get. You knew better. And I was like, where did that come from? And it just took it and put it right in my focus line and my line of vision that I could see that in such a clear way. I was like, wow, I was so ready to not only like punish myself, but shame myself of why I can't play, I can't have fun, I can't be loud, all the things that could happen. And I'm like, I didn't realize it was so deep and so heavy in that space. I saw it here, so I thought I had awareness. But in that moment, it just came up and it was like, oh, that's silly. That's quite silly. But I can see where that stemmed from of not being able to play, not being able to be loud, of causing disturbances, breaking something. Like my favorite thing, you're not my favorite thing, but the thing I was, you're a bull in a china shop. You're going to break everything. Look with your eyes, very much that I'm chaos. I'm going to break whatever I touch. I'm going to make it difficult. I'm going to make too much noise. I'm going to be disturbing, and how those little seeds just really grow into something that completely like blocks out the light and takes over. So that was just hitting on another level because that's come up so recently. And I've been working on myself for a long time so I could see it, but I didn't quite see the level of how deep that root is. That was my very first thought. Well, I'm catching my balance. Like that's what you get. So that was
Yeah.
interesting that you just said that.
And like, I love what you say about it being in the peripheral. Like, you're acknowledging that you sort of, we have that awareness that it's there, right? But like you say, when you say like you didn't realize the roots were so deep, I've sort of, this is why community, right, and witnessing other people is so important, because as I listen to you talking about it in that way, I'm just going, oh my God, yeah, like if I do it, I feel like I need to punish myself at the end. When I prove myself right that I didn't deserve the moment of joy, then I can say get back in the box. And one of the realizations that I've already had more recently as well is that I often feel like joy can only precede some kind of high achievement.
Mm.
So like I play, you guys would probably call it soccer, right? But I play football here, and sometimes I get really excited about the next game because I'm thinking if we can win, then I can have an enjoyable evening. And it's like, it's not that I can't feel that joy without the win, which is something that I think we often tell ourselves. It's I won't allow myself unless I think I've achieved something that allows me to deserve it. And that playfulness, another thing that I picked up on them when you were saying, is how easy I can sometimes pass that on to my children. So like if my kids are playing something crazy in the living room, right? Sometimes I might tell them to stop, calm down, stop it. And my daughter will say why. And one of the things I've told myself is that when they say why, I have to give them a valid reason. And if I can't vocalize, it's probably me. So she says, why can't we play this? And I go, well, because it's making loads of noise. And she's like, yeah, but it's not bedtime. And I'm like, no, it's not. It's still early. What does? And then I'm like, okay, no, let's play in this. Let me get out of my discomfort. Let me stop pushing my fear of joy onto you. And let's try and learn from that, It's just so crazy, man.
I'm reeling in that. Are you going to say
Go
so?
ahead. Go ahead.
Like that was, you said, like one of the things that like one of the agreements you have with yourself is when you say something to them or tell them to stop doing something, if they say why, you have to give them a valid reason. And if you don't have one, then it's probably you.
Mm.
Did I say that right?
Oh, it sounds so good when somebody says it back to me.
It was profound.
It is so good. Like when you said that, I was like, oh shit. Because I had an experience like 2 nights ago. We have
Oh
a
my
17-year-old and he got pissed off because he wanted to go hang out with friends and it was late and everything. And I told him no. And immediately his question is why? And I placated and I pushed him off and backpedaled and everything like that. And then eventually left the conversation without giving him a justifiable reason. And 10 minutes later, I'm in the shower and I'm sitting there processing all of it. And I'm like, I fucked up. Like that was my bad. I made a mistake. Everything he was countering the no with was really valid points. And I had to reflect on where I was at in the moment and kind of like what I was feeling emotionally. My nervous system was really fried. It was late at night. It was all of these kind of different factors. But, you know, he had all the justifiable reasons of why he should be able to do what he wanted to do. And it was based off of things that we have told him already, like boundaries that we've already set with him. And then I'm the one that screwed up and went over those boundaries because of how I was feeling in the moment, but I couldn't catch it in the moment. Luckily, it was like only 10, 15 minutes later, and I did the best that I could to kind of remedy and fix it. But I love what you just said. If you can't come up with a valid response to that question, why, then it's probably more about where you're at, right? More of what you're feeling and more about you than it is anything else.
We're incredibly grateful that you've chosen to spend your time with us. Out of all the podcasts you could be listening to right now, you're here with Steph and Craig, and we are so grateful to have you here with us. We have a simple mission. We want to help you create better relationships and live your best life. And we need your help. We have a goal of reaching over 1 million people on YouTube. And you can help us achieve that goal by heading over there right now and hitting the subscribe button for the Steph and Craig Show. And also, make sure you click on that bell so you get notified of every new episode that we have coming out. And you can take it one step further by sharing this episode or another one of your favorites with your friends, your family members, or somebody who you think would benefit from hearing this. Every little bit helps because we believe we all do better when we heal together. Now let's get back to the show.
Yeah, because I think that happens a lot with our children, you know. I think children are our greatest teachers in many respects, yeah. And I often look at I can get more uptight and more stressed with my children when I'm out in public as well, right? And you think, well, why is that? It's like, well, and it's like, so one of the things I've started doing, we've got the self-service checkouts here. You have them, right, where you scan your own stuff. I used to get really frustrated when my kids wanted to do it. And then if I go, well, why am I frustrated? And then I say I'm in a rush. And I go, no, I'm not in a rush. That's a lie. So why do I feel like I'm in a rush? I feel like I'm in a rush because I'm worried everybody's looking at me. And I'm worried that people are going to get angry with me because I'm holding them up. And actually, screw that. Let's take our time. You scan them things. You're enjoying it. I got nothing. I got no worries here, right? But if we're not doing that evaluation work, what do? Stop it. Let me do it. You're too slow. You're too annoying. You're like, you're not of any worth. You're not of any value, and all that kind of stuff. You know. So that's where kids can be our greatest teachers in that respect.
I hate that they're our greatest teachers. Like I used to struggle with that phrase because I didn't really know how to look at it. It was like, yeah, my kids can show me things and teach me things. And I was really thinking about it literally. Right, from this literal standpoint. And then because we have 4 kids, we've got 3 girls and our son is our youngest. And the level of like when I'm able to actually look and see what they have in fact taught me about myself, like it's less about like a literal thing. Yes, they can teach me new things and show me things and all those kind of things, and I can definitely learn things from them, but it's the ability to like recognize what they're triggering inside of me, what they're sparking inside of me, what they're causing me to feel in response to what they're saying or what they're doing. And a lot of what we talk about on the podcast is exactly that, where the people that you're in relationship with, and it's not just these primary relationships with your partner, but you know, your relationship with your kids, your parents, even friends, family, everything like that. They're showing you all the things inside of you that are wanting to come out and be healed and be seen. And it's just incredibly freaking hard most of the time.
Well, look, and that's why I say, by the way, that, I see people say, give your children a childhood they won't need to heal from. And I always say, I say, good luck with that. I say you try and stay as close to your kids as you can, so that when they need to do some healing work, you can be there, and you can maybe hold a bit of space for some of the stuff they're going to throw at you. Because
Yeah.
I think that's more realistic, right? Because when I look at like what you've just said there, right, and I've got 6 children, the ones that I struggle with the most are the ones who are most like me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really struggling with one of my children, and I won't even name the sex of them, right? Because if they were to listen, I don't want them to know which one it was, right? But anyway, I was struggling in the relationship, right? And I was trying to work on the relationship with them. And I remember I said to my wife one night in bed, I said, I really don't know what I'm going to do with them. Yeah. And my wife looked at me and said, they're not the problem. You are, right? And I was like, at first I was like, how dare you, right? That was my first thought, like, how dare you? And then really what I realized in the end is that they were holding the mirror up to me because they're so much like me. Every defense that I've built up around my own sensitivity, particularly, when they were around me, they pulled them defenses down and made me be with that sensitivity in a way that made me feel uncomfortable. So I always approached the relationship metaphorically, really on guard, really like worried about every time we had an interaction, you're going to expose me again. And I had to do a lot of work around it, and still do, you know, and I still find myself jumping straight to the belief that when they behave a certain way, it means because they don't care.
Can you speak more to their like pulling down that wall between you and the sensitivity part, like the sensitive part of you? Say more about that if you could.
So I think when you're highly sensitive and you're deeply in tune with your surroundings, right? When you're in the presence of a child who is the same, they're deeply intuitive, they're deeply in tune with you, and they're deeply sensitive to their surroundings. I think as an adult, you learn to be able to sort of close loops, close doors, and push certain things away. And so with particularly one of my children, they don't have the capacity to be able to go, Dad, I'm really sensing that you're oversensed at the moment, right? Something's off. It doesn't feel great. If you want to talk about it, I'm here. Of course they don't. They're a child. It's not even their duty. So what they will have a tendency to do is be around me a lot more and lean into that, the way that they're connected with me, and try and poke it and prod it like a child would with something that they don't fully understand, but they can see, what is this? Poking it, prodding it, twisting it, trying to get it. So almost what I'm experiencing is you're winding me up on purpose. You're doing this on purpose. You're pushing all of my buttons. Why are you doing it? Push them, and then I'm losing my temper. But what's actually happening is like this, and I don't want this to sound too crazy, but it's like this subconscious sort of, almost like boxing match would be the wrong metaphor, but this tussle that's going on between
a dance
our intuitions.
almost.
Yeah, a dance is a better word. Yeah, it is a dance, but it's a dance where my child is trying to come towards me, right? But I am trying to push them away. And I don't want to push my kids away, but that's why I'm trying to push them away, because I feel exposed and I feel scared, and I'm not ready to be there, you know? So
Yeah.
like, this is why it's good to like, because even now I can feel like, I don't know if I've ever fully articulated that before, you know? And it's so easy to fall back into the patterns, right? When those jostles happen, I'm the one that has power in this relationship because they're still a child. So whenever I need to, with power, I can shut it down. Yeah. And listen, I don't mean anything overly nasty, but I have the one the power. I can say, that's enough now. We're not talking about this. Carry on or whatever. Then, you know, this is over. Conversation's over. I hold the power there. So I'm always the one that can shut it down, when sometimes it's me that needs to let my guard down and realize they're coming in for a hug, not for a punch, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Open up to them, right? In those moments.
Yeah, man. Yeah. And it's
That's
hard,
bringing
right?
up so much stuff, Josh. That sparks, like, I mean, I know Steph's in the same boat right now too, because I can feel her as well, kind
Try
of
not to
being like,
cry over here. I'm
yeah,
like, oh, I have
it's
never seen it
so,
that way.
it's so accurate.
And it's exactly accurate. It's like,
It's
how
so
could I have
accurate.
missed that? How
Mm,
could I have missed that? You say that, and it's like it clicks all of these like connection points. Everything makes sense at that point. And so,
mm.
how could I have missed that? How could I have missed that?
Well, listen, what I would say is that you probably didn't miss it. It was, like you said earlier, in your peripheral, right?
Mm.
And actually, let me take that a step further, because this is actually slightly different context. I can talk about it on a podcast like this, like I've nailed it and I know exactly what's going on. That doesn't mean that when I go home tonight and I'm in the presence of them, that I'm going to see it and I'm going to act in the most appropriate way based on what we said, because I won't. Yeah, I won't. Because if knowledge of the fact was enough,
We'd
then
all be so healed, right?
my family would be the perfect family, would be the perfect family. And this is I look at all of the things that I put online and I think, man, if they brought cameras into my house for 24 hours, they'd shut my accounts down. They'd shut my accounts down, because, but so much of our stuff comes out. Yeah. Because, my go-to is always like, I'll say, you just don't care. That's what I say to my kids all the time. You don't care. And there's a million and one things going on in my kids' lives, right? Other than making sure that they put their dirty plate away, right? That like it's why do I jump straight to that they don't care, right? Because if I think that somebody doesn't care, what does that mean? Well, that means they've got no respect for me. That means they don't like me. That means they don't love me. That means that they place themselves at a higher level than me. This is all my narrative about myself. And here I am telling a 10-year-old or whatever age they might be, one of my kids, yeah, that they don't care about me because they forgot to take their plate out. You know what I mean? Like, how did I get to that they don't care? I'm chucking, why don't I go and do some work around why I think I'm not good enough to be cared for and cared about by people, yeah? Rather than shouting at my kids for not taking their plate out.
You know what's so interesting too is the dynamic where, because you talk about them coming towards us. And I think about this too in our relationship, where you can sense when somebody is sad, you can sense when somebody is off. Like it's such an easy thing to pick up on. And I don't even think it's like, yeah, there's people that are more attuned to it, that are more sensitive to it, but I think it's human nature. I think everybody has the ability to just pick up on other people's emotional states and moods, right? And when our kids are upset, when our kids are activated, when our kids are going through something, we will go towards them hoping to help them in some way, right? Hoping to figure out what it is so that we can even just be with them or fix the problem or everything. And 90% of the time, they deflect and push away, just like you described earlier, where you can feel that same dynamic playing out between you and yeah.
Because we taught them to do
Because we taught them how to do it, right?
Yeah.
They're just simply mirroring the process.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that only comes later, right? It only comes from the age of 10, 11, 12, once they've learned. And look, I take this a step further, and this is what I think happens. Like, I think children are naturally intuitive, and as adults, we hate that they are.
Yeah.
Because we're exposed 24/7. Now, let me give you an example that, like, I've used this example in the past, right? And how this happens. Now, I am quite an emotionally aware person, right? I'm trying to work on myself. I'm trying to do that. Now, I think a large portion, this isn't a judgment of people, but a large portion of people aren't, right? They're not doing this stuff. And how often do we teach kids not to trust their bodies, right? So let me give you a perfect example of what might happen in my home, right? My daughter, I've been obviously used this anecdote a few times because when I go to say it, I say she's 3 years old and she's 7 now, right? But when she was like 3 years old, if I had just had a bit of a debate with my wife, her mum in the kitchen, and she walks in, she used to go, stop it, stop it, stop it, right? And most of the time I would go, don't be silly. Everything's all right. Nothing's going on here. We're fine, right? There's nothing to see here. And what I teach her in that moment is whatever you're feeling and sensing in your body is wrong. It's wrong because I can't be bothered to explain to you that it's right. When really, if I'm emotionally available enough, I go, listen, look, me and your mum have just had a debate about something, right? We've disagreed on something. What you're picking up on is the fact that we are quite prickly with each other about it, right? It's great that you've sensed it. Now, this happens between humans all the time. It doesn't mean that we don't love each other or anything like that, but it's incredible that your body was able to sense that. But we teach children time and time and time again when they're kids, don't trust your body, don't trust your body, don't trust your body. Your body is wrong, your body is wrong, your body is wrong. And we teach them that through the things that we don't want to feel in our own body. Because when we don't want to feel it, they can't feel it. Because if they do, then I have to feel it and I don't want to. So you see how these cycles go. You see how we pick up our own, our parents' inability to feel those emotions. Like, we're always passing it on, as much as we don't want to.
Yeah, we heard the other day, this was on another episode of the podcast, where it's like our parents give us everything, right?
Yeah.
You hear that all the time. And you'll even hear that from bringing it back to like the whole dynamic of toxic parents and having to go no contact and like the arguments, like I gave you everything. I provided everything. I did all these things, right?
After
all the
everything I've done
arguments.
for you.
Yeah. All the things that I've done for you. And the way that it was framed was they give you everything. They really do give you everything. They give you all of the good that they can, at least in those moments and at that phase of their life. And they give you all of the shit, all of the bad, all of these terrible negative things that are subconsciously programming you as a child. They really do give you all of it. And it's like, it was one of those things that hit me in the moment. I was like, oh, damn. Because it's the twofold thing of recognizing it from like my parents down to me, and then very, very clearly being able to see it from me down into my children, and how it's like this huge, it's the gift of both, right? It's the gift of hopefully enough love and compassion and support and enough of the goodness of me to get them through their life, because I also gave them a really healthy dose of shadow as well.
And I think that's one of the hardest things in talking about toxic parents as a whole, right? Of talking about parents in that way, is because I think a lot of people see my content, and you both just said a couple of phrases. I've done content in the past where I say, when they say, after everything I've done for you, yeah. Now there's a way that a really sort of toxic, nasty person says that, and they say it consistently, and it's sort of it's an energy and a message that they feed you. And most parents at some stage in their life have said to their kids, after what we just did for you yesterday, you're behaving like this. So people sometimes see my content and they go, like, they look at all these things he's saying, and I see them all in myself, right? And then they go, you're saying that no contact should happen because of this, and they don't realize that, like, we all have a certain level of this in there, right? Like, this is what I say. I wouldn't want people to come in and film in my house, right? Because I recognize and know that stuff. But the difference here, and this is the big difference, and you'll perhaps know this for your own life experiences here. The big difference is that moment you talked about earlier, in where you spoke to your son, and then you was in the shower, and it hurt you, man, and you had to revisit, and you had to do that little bit of that piece of work where it might not change what you did, but you go back and you revisit and you say, listen, that was a me thing, that wasn't a you thing, right? And I think we're all flawed individuals trying our best, but that's the difference. It's that trying our best bit. It's that willingness to do a bit of the work, that willingness to try and clear up some of that shit, so that although we'll pass some of it on, we ain't going to just dump the whole heap of it on there and take no responsibility for it whatsoever,
Yeah, that's the goal, right? At least
the goal. Yeah.
I want to go back to Breathwork and what was taking place, because you mentioned that about 4 or 5 years ago when you found it and it was really impactful, and that was another big thing that I resonated with and really gravitated towards, was your breath work and the things that you do online with all the free breathing that you do, as well as breathing space. But real quick, and I know that it's probably not real quick, but we still have to imagine that people don't know what breath work is when we refer to it as breath work, right? So if you don't mind, explain it a little bit. And then I really want to know about what was going on in your life, because we find these things. I think about this all the time too, Josh, where we're constantly taking in stuff, right? And the things that we really grab a hold of and incorporate into like our, not just our spiritual practices, but like our regular routine everyday life that we use to help just to help get through life, right? Those things vary greatly, and they'll come into your life and they'll go out of your life. And then there's some of them that really stick, some of them that really, through the grace of whatever, find their way to you, and they really just latch on and stick, and they become a really integrated part of your life. And it seems like, and it sounds like, and from what I know about you, that breath has been that for you. And so what was going on in your life? How do you think it found its way to you? Like, I think about these tools and these techniques and some of these spiritual practices. And it's not to say breath work is just a spiritual practice. Obviously, you can be totally not connected spiritually and have nothing to do with that and still benefit from breath work. But I think of those things as like these beautiful little gifts that are on their path to finding me, right? Because they're going to benefit me so much, just as much as I'm on my path to finding it. And so if you could elaborate a little bit more, and there's a bunch of questions in there, so good luck.
And you started off by saying quickly, you wanted a quick answer.
Exactly. You've got 90 seconds.
Look, so let me just very quickly tell you what breathwork is without giving you the sort of the way of that you actually do it. For me, it takes you out of your head and brings you down into your body, almost forces, but that feels a little bit too strong a word. It really pushes you down into your body in a way that you haven't experienced before. I'm not talking necessarily here about calming breathing, the kind of box breathing or breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth, although we might still call that breath work. I'm talking about like a conscious connected breathing routine where you lay down and you commit to a pattern for a prolonged period of time, and it has a profound impact on your body, right? So that's like, and if you want to find out more about that, go and, put it into YouTube and you'll see all the different, there's 1,000,001 different techniques. For me, what happened is that I discovered it almost accidentally. So the long story short is that I knew I wanted to be able to meditate. Everybody said that they meditate, right? And the truth is, and this is actually probably still my truth, when I shut my eyes and tried to listen to my thoughts and do all of that, my mind went crazy, and it used to make me feel nothing but worse. And what I found is, to be completely candid, is a lot of people said they did meditation, and then when I tried to ask them how they did it, they sort of couldn't really give me an answer about what it was. And so I've started to believe that a lot of people were like me, but it was this sort of, in the communities that I existed in, we all sort of knew that we should do it. So we would say that we did it, but we didn't have this fixed practice. Anyway, I used to do it in the sauna at the gym, because the fact that I was battling against the heat a little bit gave me something. I'm sitting in here for 20 minutes and I've got to stay in here because it's really hot. And basically, I had a massive experience in there once. And it was a friend of mine afterwards, when I explained it to him, he said, that sounds like what happens when you do breath work. And I was like, well, what's breath work? So then he sent me a recording to a thing, and then I tried it and I was like, oh my God, and really, I mean, I've done a lot of alcohol and drugs in the past, yeah. And I had this massive, profound experience from doing the breath work. And what I really began to realize is that, and I think, look, in a lot of ways, we've already proved it in some of the conversations that we've had on here, yeah. I'm really good at talking about this stuff, yeah. But make no mistake about it. It's so different to actually feeling it, yeah. I've become an expert at talking about my emotions, yeah. Like I could sit in front, I could go, if I do one-to-one therapy, and I've done it in the past, and I'm not saying you shouldn't do it or that it's bad, but here's one of the things that sometimes happens. I become a good little patient, yeah? So that the therapist asks me his question, I work out why they've asked me it, and I give one hell of a good answer. I'll drop in a bit of emotion in my voice if I need to, if I think that's what I need to make them feel good about it. The session finishes, they think it was the most amazing, profound session full of breakthroughs, and I've not even touched the surface. I've done what I do all of my life, which is rationalize that ducking and diving that I do with my kids to jostle around it so I don't have to go there. Breath work remains still today the one thing that doesn't let me, well, actually, I still try and jostle around it for the first sort of 10 minutes of doing the breathing pattern, to be honest with you. But once it gets me, it's probably one of the only things that really truly brings me to my body, you know? And so it's been profound for me in that way, in that a regular practice has really helped me to release stuff that I don't necessarily have to rationalize. And just to wrap that up as well, because I think this bit's really important. Like I know, like I say, I know everything. We're proving today already that there's loads more to learn, right? Because we're always learning. But I know a lot about what's happened to me. You know, I'm quite an expert in all of that stuff, yeah. But a lot of what I've experienced happened before I developed my rational brain, right? So I can't learn about that rationally. It's in my body. It's in my body. And so my nervous system is active, very active, a lot. And we're always taught that the way that we think, and I do think these things are sort of so intertwined, but sometimes my nervous system reacts and then my rationale comes after, because there's nothing there, but my body's picked up on something and it's reacting to something I experienced, I believe, pre-rational brain. And so it's not there. The solution's not here. The solution's in here. So breathwork's been incredible for me in that sense. And it's, you know, I've stuck with a regular practice in a whole bunch of different capacities. I'm able to meditate now through like using my breath. And it's been incredible for me. Yeah. Was that quick enough?
That was perfect. Hey, everybody. We just want to take a minute and really thank you for being here and choosing to listen to the podcast. We know there's a lot of options out there, and we don't take it lightly that you chose us. If you're enjoying the podcast, do us a favor and leave us a review wherever you're listening. All of those reviews and the 5 stars and all of that stuff, it really helps the podcast grow and expand and reach more people. We have a big mission with this show because we believe in the healing power of podcasting. That might seem silly to you, but we've both had life-changing experiences because of stuff that we've heard on podcasts. So if you want to help us on our mission to reach 1 million people, share the podcast as well with anybody that you think might benefit, because we believe that we all do better when we heal together. Thanks. Now let's get back to the show. I love that you talk about, you know, even today, I mean, you practice it, you teach it, you guide it, and you still struggle in it in the beginning of it. Like your body is still resisting that space sometimes. And I relate to that so much, where it's like, because we're yoga teachers, we do breath, we, you know, meditate, we do all of these things and we talk about them a lot. We, you know, preach about the benefits of all of them. We had yoga this past week. We teach a Sunday morning yoga class. And at the end of the class, I was just sitting there so grateful, because that is honestly, at this point in my life, with everything else that we have going on, that's the only time I'm on a yoga mat. I don't have a regular weekly practice where I'm waking up every morning like I want to, that I should, that I have before. You know, we go through phases and everything like that. But I love that you know, there's something about, like you said, the things that are stored subconsciously in our bodies, in our nervous systems. It's like that part of me is so afraid to still go into those spaces where I know that those walls are going to be let down. It kind of ties back into that thing where kids are coming towards that and pushing against that. It's almost like this inner part of me is pushing against that as well. And then I have the adult version of me, or the cognitive part of me, that is resistant to it, because like every time I would do one of your breath works, and like I love the idea too that we can just throw on headphones and listen, like you don't have to be in the same room. And there's so many, you know, amazing things that can happen just by listening to your, not just you talk, but doing all of these things. Every time I go towards them, every time I step into that place, even like going to yoga and teaching yoga, there's a part of me that is always like, fuck that. I don't want to do that. I'm pushing against those things, because I think it is that part of me that is so not just traumatized and wounded and in pain and in hurt, but it's my activated nervous system that has been the norm for so long, that calming it and going into those spaces and doing those things that are going to relax it and help it just come down, it is scary almost always. Even if I don't have cognitive awareness of it. I can always feel the resistance in my body no matter what.
It's the strongest resistance as well, right? Like in my case, talking in my experience, and just as you was talking there, I was thinking about it, and I don't know if I've ever vocalized it in this way, but like if I just talk about my own experience of like, so for the first 9 years, my dad was an alcoholic, right? So I lived in a very chaotic, frightening, scary environment a lot, right? Even when it wasn't scary, you were scared about it becoming scary again. Then when I think of like how sensitive and intuitive I am, and how hard that must have been for the child that I was in some of the things, when I think rationally about some of the experiences that I had, the impact that must have had on me, and how the only survival mechanism I must have had would have been to escape my body, right? Like that's what I stayed alive through my childhood because I escaped my body. I stayed alive through my teenage years through drugs and alcohol because I needed something extra to escape my body. And now as an adult, I'm trying to teach myself that the solution is to be in my body, right? And so I'm literally teaching that youngest part of myself, that young part of myself, to run back into the burning building. And I'm saying, if we get in there, it's going to be all right. You know, because when I think about it, when you were just talking, that's what I'm doing. My solution all my life has been escape, has to run away from my body, is to not be in my. It's not safe to be in my body. It's never been safe to be in my body, not physically, you know, as in because I might get hurt physically, but because to be in my body and to feel what's going on around me is not safe. And so, you know, what I notice in my life, to expand on that a little bit as well, is that in my deep and meaningful personal relationships, I find it hard to be in my body too, because I want to get out of my body so that I can be safe. But by doing that, I'm not. By doing that, I'm not present to the people that love me and want to be with me because I'm not there. You know, and so it makes sense that there's so much resistance. And I wish that by saying all of that, then it would mean that I'd go, brilliant. And then the next breath work, I'll lay down and just fall straight into it. But yes, I always run away from it.
Yeah, describing it that way, I think, is really profound. I think there's a lot of people that can relate to that. Just knowing that everybody's experiences are different, right? All of our childhoods were even like within our own family units. I had 2 older brothers, and I know my experience is so vastly different than their experience, even though we grew up in the same house. And thinking about it from that perspective of, yeah, it wasn't safe to be in my body, you know, for all those things that you talked about, as well as like for whatever reason. And I've never looked at it from that lens specifically, of the whole idea of like, okay, I'm going and I'm, you know, grabbing the hand of my little 5-year-old and being like, come on, dude, let's go back into that fucking shit show of a place where everything is dangerous and everything hurts and everything is hard and you don't understand anything about what's going on. Come with me. Not only come with me, but lay down, relax. We're going to be in there for quite a while, breathing and doing things that are connecting us to our bodies. And that kid's like, get the fuck out of here. What are you talking about? I want nothing to do with that. So it makes a lot of sense. Like, it hurts. I can feel it inside of my body right now. And like you said, it's a really strong resistance. And like, I hate that I have it. And I wish that it was, like you said, just easy enough to have awareness of it and then it would magically fix itself. But it's also inspiring to think about that. That's all that we have to do now is help that part of us, or those versions of us at whatever age it is. Because sometimes it's easier, but it's never easy, right? It's never like a breeze. It's always a challenge. It's always difficult.
Yeah, because you got to jump through the fire. Sorry, go on.
No, you're okay. Sorry. The having the awareness of that, just because we're overthinkers. We've learned how to try and really like process, intellectualize everything to stop from feeling it. We just want to fix it and not have to experience it. So it also comes with a lot of, why can't I meditate? Why can't I do breath work? Why is this so hard?
Yeah,
I
all
see
the
them
judgment,
online.
all the
Look at how good
criticism,
they're
all the
doing.
internalized shame.
Right. And you're like, even like, look at my house. If you saw my house, like if you saw in our house, like it looks like people are just getting it right. And you're the one that's getting it wrong. And then that perfectionism comes in. Well, if I can't do it daily, then I'm failing. There's no point. And then when you have those moments, they're scary. And then you stop. So it comes with all this self-criticizing and all this shame that keeps you from getting into your body. Cause that's also an ego like trick to helping you from not running into that burning building. So when we have these overthinkers and perfectionism coming in to hear that, oh, it's really hard. It's for the people that make it look easy. They're struggling just as much as I am. Oh, that makes sense. This is in my body, pure. I mean, prior to the ability to cognitively understand what's happening and work it out, that it's a feeling inside. And that the picture that you just painted of like teaching them to run back into the burning building is so profound. And it's terrifying. Like, right. I can feel that coming up. I'm like, that's exactly what it feels like. And it starts to almost feel like compression, but then it's also this massive liberation in this space that comes up, because of course it feels this way. I can conceptualize why it feels that way and not shame, blame, criticize myself and keep myself away from that space or think I have to do it this way. It's almost like giving this permission to be messy and allow the process of going into that space, allow the ability to try and let it be what it is without saying it has to be this or I'm failing.
And you listen, one of the ways that I set up the breath work when I deliver it to people, and I've been really like, this is probably the most thing I'm passionate about as somebody who sort of facilitates the sessions, is how accessible it is and how what you just described there, you don't have to do it perfect. And I say to people, like, I'm going to tell you the technique, but honestly, if you just stick with me and fill your body with air and let it go and stay connected, this will work. Make no mistake about it. Don't let your head get in the way of this, because this will work. And it really is that powerful. And I do think that sometimes some of the way that it's facilitated out there, again, I'm not doing any of it down because I love it all, but it overcomplicates it sometimes. And then it makes people that think, oh, I'm not doing it right. And then they like give up and they think, and I just think the power in the breath is so accessible. And it's so about a you experience. And it's not even about becoming good at breath work or doing breath work well or anything like that. It's about how do you be with that little version near that burning building and move towards it, like, and show it. Because like you say, if you can jump through the fire, the other side is where it's at, right? Like that's where it's at. That's where you want to be. But it's just about feeling safe to go there and to be there, you know. And that's why I'm so genuinely so passionate about not gatekeeping breathwork in any way, and making sure that I strip it right back as much as I can when I deliver it. I try not to use any fancy language when I'm delivering it to people, because I want them to just see this is just, we're just going to breathe, and this is just about you and an experience for you and nothing else, you know, nothing else. And that's why I think I've, you know, been lucky enough to deliver it to so many people in what is a relatively short period of time, really, like 4 years or whatever it's been.
This is really beautiful, man. It was so profound for me. I had a breathwork practice in a sense, but it was really centered around yoga and some of the different, like, slower, more meditative breathing. And in the past, I had done a lot of, you know, like I did breath work with kind of Wim Hof and ice. And even earlier on, we had kind of deep spiritual experiences that came through some really powerful breath work. But it's like it came back into my life when I found you as well, right at the time that I needed it again, and all those kind of beautiful things that happened. But I want to talk more to, I want to talk about your book, and I want to talk about what you find when it comes from, see, I think, like, when you say toxic parents, because the name of the title of the book, right? It's them, it's not you. And the whole idea that your parents shape and influence who you are. And everybody has a relationship, obviously, with their parents. Everybody has a story about that relationship with their parents. And I think it's so important for people to start looking at like both sides of it. I'm going to do my best to flesh out this thought because truthfully, it comes from my own lived experience of it, where there's a little part of me, like there's this kid inside of me that never wants to see my parents as anything other than perfect, loving parents. I always want to see the best about them. I always want to see the things about them that they did for me that made me feel good. The Christmas mornings that I can remember, all these like really, really beneficial things. And part of it is, yes, that's like, them saying, well, look at all that I did for you. But I think it's deeper than that. I think it's this part of me inside that doesn't want to look at the negative things, because every time I look at the negative things, it feels like I'm being pulled away from my parents. It feels like I'm, having to feel the loss and the pain. So if I'm really facing the reality of them as humans and what they were throughout my entire life, then I'm facing the reality of all that was, the totality of that picture. And I think there is something innate in like the kid and in the child and in the human itself, the baby, that will turn a blind eye or even be oblivious to what their parents were doing, simply because so much of it is encoded in like DNA that we have to attach to them in order to survive. So it's like the base survival instinct. It almost reminds me of, there was an episode of Black Mirror where they had, you could like not phase out, but blur out sections of life, like blur out parts of reality that were harmful or that were difficult, so that it wasn't even, you couldn't even see it. That's what it reminds me of, is there's just parts of my childhood that have been blurred out, whether through trauma or through abuse or through everything. But I think of it now as that part where it's like, it's just so hard to face the truth of it. And I know you get a lot of pushback from people online. And I think it is that instinctual part where people just don't want to look at both sides of it, right? They don't want to see the darker part of the reality of some of the things that we've been talking about.
There's also that part where they've made it a sin, in a sense, like, how dare you not honor your parents? How dare you? Don't you know how toxic it is for you? You're being toxic to them. How dare you hurt them? Because you like might have also been programmed that you just have to completely honor and bow down. So there's like this whole aspect of, it doesn't, no matter which way, either you have to face the truth of things, which means it convolutes what you thought, your image, your safety, and the punishment that can come. There's so many ways that it is absolutely terrifying to step into. And then I can see how a lot of people would say, oh, instead of facing that and how that makes me feel, I'm going to make you wrong for even suggesting that that's an option for me, because I don't feel like it's an option for me. So don't tell me it is. And then like, so that comes as an attack.
Mm. And I think that, look, I think there's lots of different reasons why. And I've certainly learned, because I try to interact with some people and out of curiosity, try and like think, why are you so angry with me, right? With what I'm saying here. And I think what you've both done is just like, the reality of things is that nobody is any one label, right? I'm not my name. I'm not a breathwork coach, but if I'm going to deliver a breathwork session, let's describe me as a breathwork coach, because that's the best umbrella term to use, because like, if, a football player is not a football player, but when we're talking about them in the context of that, then let's call them a football player, because that's what language is. And so like, when people say to me, nobody's toxic, just their behavior's toxic, I'm like, listen, at the top level of this conversation, if somebody's been toxic and abusive for someone's entire life, I'm quite comfortable to start this conversation by calling them a toxic parent, right? And then let's unpack that and let's go and listen, you might trace back to what was once a loving beautiful child that, you know, had a horrible life and it did all of this thing, and then they became toxic. Like, okay, great. Like, you can get there with the work, and that's where you might go and all of that kind of stuff. But when you think about some of the things that you've just said there, Craig, like when like as children, we have to attach to our parents, right? They're God to us when we're born, more so than most other animals in the animal kingdom, because we're so dependent on them, right? And if you look at that, by the way, scientifically, that's because when we went up onto 2 legs from 4, a lady's hips narrowed and you couldn't get a fully formed brain out, right? So if you think of a horse or a cow, it can walk straight away when it's born because they're on 4 legs and the hips are of a place where a brain can do all its forming in the much safer place of inside the body, right? We've evolved a different way. And so for at least 2 years, you wouldn't survive a day if you didn't attach to your parents. So in those initial years when we're really developing at the fastest rate, it's paramount survival that we attach to our parents. So Gabor Mate would say that when our authenticity, who we are, threatens that attachment, the authenticity in the early years will lose every single time because attachment is more paramount. It's more paramount to survival. And then, even as we grow up beyond that, if we were to admit the level to ourselves when we were a child of the level of toxicity of what we were experiencing, that would be to admit that our parents can't love us and can't be there in a loving way. So, of course, we're not going to admit that to ourselves because we have no other choice but to normally, in most cases, take the responsibility on ourselves. Children are egocentric. So, of course, the story that they create is that I'm the problem. You know, if I could just be good enough, yeah, if I could just be likable and caring enough, then maybe my mum or my dad or whoever it would care for me in that way, right? And there's no doubt in my mind that that narrative is then linked to me pissed off with one of my kids, thinking they don't love me and they don't respect me when there's a dirty plate, right? So the two are intrinsically linked. And so the best possible solution, I believe, that we can start to offer people that have grown up in that is to go, hang on a minute. Let's forget everybody else for just 1 second. And let's talk about you and your experience. And let's frame it in a way that makes sense to you in this moment. And if you want to call them a toxic parent because that's what you've experienced, then let's let go of the whole lifetime of making sure that everybody else is okay all of the time and everybody else gets to feel comfortable. And let's start where you're at. And I passionately believe that, right? And one of the reasons I passionately believe it is because my dad was an alcoholic. And I was taught from a very young age. He died when I was 9. I saw some terrible things as a result of the way that he was. And I was taught that he was a good man who sometimes got too drunk. Yeah. Now, maybe that was true. To be honest with you, I can't fully remember. But what plagued me was spending my whole life self-organizing, trying to be funny enough, good enough, likable enough to be able to receive love. So my healing is not more watered down trying to make everybody love me. My healing is, let me tell you my truth. Let me get really clear and uncomfortable with it. And let me be who I'm supposed to be. And if you don't like that, right, and it makes you feel uncomfortable because you think that I sound this, angry or whatever people say that I am online, then that's on you. Because I'm talking about people's real experience at a truth, and I think that's what people really struggle with, and that's, I do sound passionate and angry when I talk about it. And the truth is because it makes me passionate and angry. It makes me passionate and angry that everyone's got something to say to protect the person who's been toxic and horrible for somebody's whole life. And they're doing it at the expense of the victim. Why don't we start at the victim and work out? We do that everywhere else. If somebody murders somebody, we call them a murderer, we put them in prison, and then we support the victims of that murder. Why don't we do that that's all I'm asking people to do here. Now, the murderer might go to prison for 30 years and learn their lesson and stop being a murderer when they come out. Maybe they won't. But we don't focus on them instead of their victim. It makes no sense.
Josh, you're doing good work, man.
Thank you, man. Thank you. I hope so.
Yeah, no, you're doing really good work, man. I love everything you're putting out there. The book it's pre-released right now, right? People can go order it. and pre-order it on Amazon. And I saw that you just announced too that the pre-order on Audible as well, right?
Yeah, I believe it may be tricky to get hold of in the States, but something is being worked on at this very moment, and there'll be an announcement very, very soon. So don't worry about that. If you're keen, just hold up a little while and something. I think there'll be an announcement soon when the T's are crossed and that stuff.
Awesome. Is there?
Oh,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, well, I know we're getting it, so that's good to know. Hang on, and as soon as it comes in, just keep watching for it. I think everybody's going to benefit from this book. There's that part that you were just saying where it's taking the attention on yourself, and I just want to loop back to highlight that. So many people never got permission to feel what they're feeling and allow their feelings to be valid and allow the attention to be them and not people pleasing, not making it better. So just that moment of like, I get to be upset. What I'm feeling is valid. What I'm feeling is justified. I get to work on me. I get to heal for me and not to make you love me, not to water down your healing for anybody else and keep it like focus on you. That is like that spark just starts sliding. It's like that little bit. Sometimes it really is somebody saying you're worth it, you're enough, you get to heal for you. That little seed that gets planted of permission that can completely liberate somebody. So I'm really, really feeling that. And I'm really excited to read your book, Josh. I'm really excited to read your book.
Thank you. Yeah. And listen, it's exactly what you said there, that I think true healing is about taking up that space, isn't it? It's about taking up that space and unapologetically being in your truth. And by the way, knowing that your truth might change tomorrow. So let me unapologetically be me today, and then I'll unapologetically be me tomorrow as well. Sometimes if we're not careful, our spiritual practice becomes a new way to disguise our people pleasing and self-organizing, and we're just trying to be lovable again. And if I see everyone as love and light and describe everyone through the lens of love and compassion, then maybe everybody will love and like me, right? And that's the same regurgitated thing I've done all of my life. And don't get me wrong, I still fall into it, especially when I get a particular amount of kickback on a post. Part of me's thinking the next one I do is going to be, bringing everyone back in, getting them all back on side, because it's there. So yeah, stand in our power, be me, be you, and look, if you look at a lot of spiritual texts, at the core of it, that's what it'll say, they often talk about the great I am, like the great I amness. That's what children have when they're born, right? In those initial years, when you look at a child, they are the great I am. I am me. I am me in all of my glory. Yeah. And then slowly we get hold of them and say, don't be you. Come and fit into this system. And then life, I think, is about undoing all of that crap and coming back out again and going, actually, this is who I am,
Oh my goodness.
Thank you so much, man. You'll have to come back when the book finally launches, and we'll throw everything down in the show notes so people know where to find you and where to follow you. Again, is there anything you want to throw out before we wrap up?
Just that I've absolutely loved this conversation. It's one of I perhaps say things maybe similar at the end of, I don't, but I really mean that this has been therapeutic in nature. It's been enlightening, and one of the best conversations I've had in a very long time. So thank you.
Thank you, man.
We
wrap every show, because that's, oh my goodness, getting so tongue-tied. We wrap every show with a tagline. It's expect the best and plan for the greatest. So thank you, Josh. And we'll see everybody on the next episode.
Thank you.
Wait and see, you and me, we were meant to be.
We want to make something perfectly clear. This podcast is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as a substitute for professional advice. We're sharing with you our own personal experiences and insights, things we have found to be helpful on our healing journey, but we are not licensed therapists. If you need help, it's important to seek out a qualified professional. Remember, we believe that we all do better when we heal together. See you soon.